So, hi, it's Tam from R'lyeh Expeditions. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the release of Ravenloft, The Horrors Within, and in particular, I'm going to talk a little bit about the domains that were released in this book, and also where you can find some further information if you want to do a little bit of a deep dive into some of these domains, because a little bit it is the case of everything old is new again. There are certainly a lot of people saying, hey, this is a new domain or this was not done before. And I'm going to probably politely correct some people on a couple of those statements that I'm hearing around the internet at the moment. But I'd also want to talk a little bit about why you can draw some inspiration in addition to what's already been provided as adventure hooks or campaign hooks in this book. I will actually start with the very big premise of you can absolutely run a whole campaign in Ravenloft. You can absolutely do it. Um, I've done it. It's not easy, but it's doable. And the reason why I say it's not easy is because each single domain has its own flavor, its own Dark Lord, its own history, its own everything. So you really and if you wanted to literally traverse through every single one of them, it's going to take you years. So just be mindful of that. I think, to be honest with you, the 17 domains or the that they've highlighted here are actually a really good mixture of different types of horror and different types of domain structure. So I would absolutely consider running any of these domains and using those campaign hooks. This is just a little bit what I'm going to call a bit of an add-on, just to expand on some of the mythology. So first of all, obviously, you've got Barovia. So Barovia is always going to be a part of Ravenloft. I think that the two of them are like peanut butter and jelly. They absolutely do go together on this. And obviously, if you don't want to run the stuff that's in this book, you would be looking at potentially running Curse of Strahd. This Curse of Strahd is a beautifully updated version of the original Ravenloft module, which I think is I6. Off the top of my head, that's showing my age and my memory. But this one is absolutely pinnacle to everything that we do in Barovia, and everything we do in Ravenloft. So this is your classic horror story in terms of the haunted castle. But I will say, beware, this isn't really Dracula. So if you are playing Strahd with the full-on Bela Lugosi accent, maybe reconsider this up front. Second, we have Borsa. I absolutely love this domain. It is one that has got a level of intrigue about it that I've always loved in terms of the political intrigue between houses. When I think of this one, I always think of like Game of Thrones, that sort of interfighting between political factions with, poisonous consequences. I do love that this one has got the two, it still remains with the two Dark Lords and the interfighting. You can absolutely insert characters into this absolute storm of madness, and it is absolutely, again, it's classic for a reason. There isn't actually a lot of old school module material for this particular domain, which I think is a an oversight, really. But I would absolutely love to hear of people running things in their own campaigns and their own domains with this. Thirdly, we have Darkon. So Darkon is an interesting domain in that it's a domain on the verge of collapse. Now, there is a lot of information on Darkon in the history. It is one of the first domains. Azil, the Lich, is very known in Ravenloft lore. The interesting thing I found with Darkon is that there is a whole module or box set module called Requiem that's set around a thing called the Grim Harvest. And it also builds on this idea that a city becomes like a city of the dead. It's a necropolis, basically. It is really, really cool material. It's not included in this version. However, I still love the idea that what happens when a domain runs out of steam? What happens when the Dark Lord leaves? It's very much a very, for me as a Cthulhu enthusiast, I absolutely love the fact that this is got a Cthulhu sort of existential horror element to it. Um, Dementlu is all about masks and masquerades. The horror in this domain actually comes from what's underneath it, not necessarily what's on the surface. Again, it's a more sort of masks and horror. The masks that we wear, in terms of not only our own masks that we wear in a masquerade, but also the societal masks. It is there is some really cool some of the historical stuff on this. Some of the write-ups in previous versions and in this version actually really do touch on that fact that this is a domain that is outwardly opulent but inside decaying. It's decaying from within, and I really do love this whole concept. Again, it's one that didn't get a lot of love in the original sets or in a lot of the original adventure materials, but it does actually have coverage within the novel series. So if you happen to get a copy of the old Ravenloft novel series, there is absolutely almost every single domain does have a novel set within that domain. All right. So Sokovia. So I have to, number one, with my Australian accent, I have to be very, very careful how I actually pronounce this, because I have gotten in trouble before for pronouncing it really, really wrong, as you can imagine. So this is absolutely. This has two things in it that I absolutely love. The very first thing is that this is based on Vlad the Impaler. So it's about an invading army. So trying to almost to become a tyrant to stop an army from invading from within. This has also got a gender swapped Dark Lord. This is actually something I noticed in Van Richten's guide, and it's definitely prevalent here. They've swapped a number of them. They're male to female swaps for a lot of these Dark Lords. I personally don't mind that. It doesn't really matter in terms of the way that you would portray this, whether you portray it as a woman or as a man. The only thing is that it does ring a little hollow against when you look at the historical or the literary source material that these are based on. The minute I said Vlad the Impaler, you don't picture a woman, and this is a thing that it is very prevalent in a lot of these domains now for this particular setting. But like I said, not a huge issue, not calling this out as woke or anything else, just noticing that, just note that when you're thinking about the inspiration behind it. Haruka is a absolute classic domain. It has got a old module which is called Touch of Death, which is absolutely amazing and really, really good. I absolutely love dealing with anything with Egyptology, and this one is absolutely in my sweet spot for that reason. This one is actually one of the domains, I will say, that some of the Egypt-centric Call of Cthulhu material may actually translate quite nicely across into Haruka. And something like the necropolis, for instance, second mention today. So there's definitely things that you can use from other sources to flesh out this particular domain, but there is actually a fair bit of source material for this one. Haslan is magic as enemy or magic as issue. Absolutely glorious. Again, another one that didn't have a lot of representation in the original adventure modules, but always was an interesting domain. Was documented in every single version of the Ravenloft setting. It absolutely deserves its place here. And again, it's another one I really want to see represented within campaigns. I want to see people run some of these domains because I think they've got such a rich history and they absolutely should be on there. Now, Innsmouth is new, not new to us from Call of Cthulhu. Also, Cthulhu is not new. I'm sorry, team. I know so many people going, this is the first time we've had a stat block for Cthulhu. No, unfortunately. There's been 2 stat blocks for Cthulhu before, and one was quite recent in Cthulhu by Torchlight. So just be aware that when you make claims that there's no Cthulhu in D&D, there absolutely is. But what I will say is I found this one interesting because Innsmouth more lends to me as a Cthulhu person in that I would always go Innsmouth is more Mother Hydra and Father Dagon rather than Cthulhu. I understand why they've put Cthulhu here. I'm really a little bit on the fence. I think I will have to see how this plays and bring this to my table. What I will say is that I'm actually looking at creating my own domain for Cthulhu for the Domains of Dread, and I'm actually going to do it in R'lyeh, not Innsmouth. So when I do that, absolutely, we'll publish the stats. But yeah, that one is a little bit of it jars for me, but that's because of the rich history I have with both Ravenloft and Call of Cthulhu. If I didn't have that rich history, I probably would find this really intriguing and absolutely would love it to bits. Okay, so Kalakiri is new to me. I'm sure it was in other versions, and people will obviously correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I am intrigued by it. I love a new domain. I think it's something that if I haven't heard of it before, chances are it is around somewhere. It's just something new for me. Carnicus is not new to me, however. Carnicus is our bard's dream gone bad. And I've actually loved it for a very long time. Feast of Goblins is the module originally designed for this, but I will say any update on Feast of Goblins is probably good because that module is not very good. I do also love the idea of a charismatic Dark Lord, and Harkon Lucas is absolutely that. So I am looking forward to seeing how people play Harkon at their tables. Lamordia this is Frankenstein. This is absolutely Frankenstein. So originally, there was an adventure module that was called Adam's Wrath, which is set in Lamordia. There's also a lot of old material around Van Richten's Guide to the Created, which absolutely talks about, the idea of like flesh golems and things like that. That would absolutely lend to this particular domain. Again, this is another one where they've gender swapped the Dark Lord. I'm not entirely sure why there's such a push. I guess maybe it's because most of the Dark Lords are dudes or something. But again, only jars when you think about it in terms of the source material could absolutely work. And I mean, I'm always down for a mad scientist. It's just my theme. So Mordant is your haunted house ghost story, and I do like Wilfred Godefroy. I absolutely, again, this is classic for a reason. There's actually a number of modules and adventures set in Mordant, including, I believe, there's one in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. There is Bleak House, which is an absolutely fantastic box set from second edition, that features Morden heavily. There is lots and lots of content for Morden. It is absolutely your ghost story, whistle and I'll come to you type, E.L. James type vibe, and I absolutely love Morden for that. Shadowlands is also not new to me. There was whole box sets, and I know of people. There's fellow YouTubers who are actually running whole campaigns at the moment in Shadowlands. I do love Ebonbane as both a weapon, a magical item, and a Lord of a Domain. All three of those, just delicious combination, and definitely worth checking out. Scythicus. So I will say, guys, sorry, Scythicus is also not new. So Scythicus was heavily covered in When Black Roses Bloom, which was a module for second edition. It was also covered in the novel Night of the Black Rose in the Ravenloft series. I think it was like the second or third novel. So Lord Soth in Ravenloft is absolutely very heavily covered, and I like that they've kept the theming and the sort of tragicness of Soth, even though, let's be honest, he brought it on himself. But this is absolutely I do love Scythicus. I mean, I would say I'm a fan of Dragonlance, and I am a fan, and I remember reading the original Dragonlance novels and just finding Lord Soth such a terrifying presence. So this Scythicus just spoke to me when I first started running Ravenloft in the mid 90s, and it certainly speaks to me now. So I'm kind of glad that he has come back in parallel to obviously being part of Dragonlance. Tempest is absolutely one of my favorite domains for a reason. I absolutely love folk horror, but this one I am covering in my 13 Forgotten Ravenloft domains for a very good reason. And this is because it has gone so far away from what it originally was. So Tempest was originally it was the fairy tale nightmare. And I absolutely loved it for that. I love the idea that you almost had a Red Riding Hood or Hansel and Gretel type feel with Tempest. Now, obviously, they have gone so far the other way. They've lent so heavily into folk horror, which I also love. So this is not a knock and saying, oh no, they moved it away from what it was and now it's bad. This is actually an example of it actually working. But the problem is for Tempest, and I think where it struggles, it's a it's a folk horror domain where there is so many other campaign settings now that are leaning heavily into folk horror. The Crooked Moon being the very most obvious one. So I think that unfortunately, Tempest may get lost in the shuffle again because it's such a domain of contrast. I think that if you lent into the Fae side of it, so lent into something like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, this could work for Tempest. And the alternative, if you're leaning more the Crooked Moon side of it, you could lean into Tempest quite easily. I did run an adventure for Tempest last year, based off my love of Midsummer and the Wicker Man, and combined those elements in, and it does absolutely work with the folk horror aesthetic. But yeah, just be careful with Tempest. It is one of those ones that it could very easily become forgotten simply because it is kind of sitting in a weird middle ground at the moment where there is a lot of things covering this particular element of horror. And Valakan. So Valakan for me is another one. It's a classic domain for a reason. I absolutely do like Valakan, and I do think it's got some really interesting elements to it. I love the idea of the most dangerous game, and this is what this lends into, the idea of the hunt. So it absolutely has all of those elements going for it. I would happily run though in any of these domains quite contently, and love to switch the styles up in each domain. What I will also say is do refer to a lot of the information that is available to you in relation to running using Dark Lords and escaping Ravenloft. All of this stuff here in chapter 3. It's also stuff that's been published in Van Richten's. It's stuff that's published in a lot of the other original Ravenloft box sets. I will say, realistically, remember this, and I know that this is going to sound very, I'm hoping it doesn't sound condescending, but run the Ravenloft Dark Lords as human. Run them as human. They are monsters, yes, but they're all got a story as to how they ended up where they are. So don't go into Ravenloft thinking, oh, this is just another big bad that my party is going to encounter and they're going to beat up. You've got to remember that, and I always say this about Ravenloft Lords, is they are the hero of their own story. So remember that they're the hero of their own story. Strahd doesn't walk around twirling his mustache going, I am so evil, look at me, I am so evil. He doesn't do that. He wants to befriend the adventurers. He wants to bring them in. He wants to have them for dinner, possibly literally. But you've got to remember that that's the thing with all of these Dark Lords. All of them, you've got to play them smart. You've got to play them, there's lots and lots of adventure hooks for all of these characters. And you really do need to, as a GM, read through and understand which Dark Lord you're running and why is something that you'd be interested in running. I could go through the other domains of dread, but I will probably run out of time. But I just wanted to touch on those ones. It is a little bit of everything old is new again, but that is okay, because one of the things that I comment often about Ravenloft is I want people who have never seen Ravenloft before to come and discover Ravenloft and discover it with the same passion and the love that I did when I first discovered it. I always think that it's a little bit like introducing a friend to your favorite film that that they've never seen, or your favorite book, or your favorite piece of music. When you're discovering something new, when you're giving them something new, then that is absolutely, just because you've seen it before doesn't mean they have. So what I want people to go into this book with is a very open mind of, hey, this is absolutely something that I'm introducing you to. I'm taking your hand and I'm leading you through the darkness. And I think that that will become a huge staple of things going forward. I will admit that unfortunately, my favorite domain, which is Forlorn, it got left out again, but that's okay. We can deal with this. It's in the other domains. We've still got all the historical material, but I will leave it there. But I do want to know your feedback and your comments. I did obviously. I do have a love for some of the new subclasses. My all-time favorite is the Hollow Warden. I think that the Ranger finally got some serious love, and I wish I had recorded my first reaction to it, because I was squealing like a girl, yelling out stuff about, oh my God, Wendigo boy. So if you want me to talk about the Hollow Warden in more detail, I'm more than happy to do that. But until next time, when we take our next trip to the South Pacific or to the Mists of Ravenloft, this is Tam of R'lyeh signing off. And I really look forward to your comments and questions in relation to the new Ravenloft material. Until that next time, bye.